podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Welcome back to Tennis Unfiltered with me, James Gray of iNews.co.uk and the iNewspaper. I've got George Bellshaw once again on his phone and doing what I can only imagine. If I tell you it's the worst angle possible, then you just use your imagination at home and you'll know what me and Calvin are staring at. And I also have Calvin Betton. I'm fresh from Paris, back home for about 12 hours. Calvin skedaddled back from Nottingham to South Yorkshire to record this evening. We're going to look back at the two finals over the weekend. Maybe answer one or two quick questions as well. Although I'm going to have a quick apology to everyone who's sent in a question over the last week or so. I'm aware that you have done so, and there are lots of them. And we will do like a big question and answer session in the next week or so, because I know we haven't had time to get to them necessarily. So we will definitely do that. But there is lots of tennis to talk about in the meantime. There is only one place to start, I always say it, but it's true. Novak Djokovic became the 23-time Grand Slam champion, breaking the male record, eclipsing Rafael Nadal's total. He also became the oldest ever French Open champion by 18 days. There are so many records he broke in the process of beating Casper Ruud in what was actually a surprisingly competitive match, at least for the first 90 minutes, although, as so often happens with Djokovic, the scoreboard basically just told the story as he won 7-6, 6-3, 7-5. Calvin, your overall thoughts? I mean, I've made a note here that says, does this mean that Novak is definitely the male GOAT now?
I mean, I just think that's a ridiculous debate, so I'm not getting into that.
Great, well, that's the first 10 minutes of the pod gone.
No, people have already decided. Look, everyone's already decided. There's nothing that can happen now in terms of, this doesn't make, winning the French Open in 2023, beating Casper Ruud in the final, doesn't alter Novak Djokovic's legacy for me at all, especially seeing as the other two aren't playing for one reason or another. So, and I don't think even if he wins another 5, which he might do, that doesn't really change it to me. It's how you want to view the greatest of all time. Although I don't really know why we need a greatest of all time, but same with anything, really. Why we can't just go, they're all brilliant, is a bit odd, but, whatever. But what's the initial question? Sorry,
even for you, Calvin, that is a curmudgeonly start. I'm very up for it.
Everyone has kind of decided, and that's what my point is, that, Novak Djokovic fans are already going to think that he's the best ever anyway. Federer fans have already decided that he is, and Nadal fans have already decided that he is. So most neutrals, weirdly, most neutrals don't think it's Nadal. Most neutrals think it's one or the other, Federer or Djokovic. And again, it's what you prefer to get from how you decide on it. If you decide purely on numbers, then you're going to say it's Djokovic. If you're going to decide on what they offered to the sport as a whole and what they had, what they did and what they offered as a spectator to a spectator, did they transcend the game? Those people, if you think that way, you'll say it's Federer. So, that's the way it is at the minute.
The match itself, and we were all pretty much in agreement that we thought Casper Ruud would lose in straight sets, and he did. I don't think any of us thought the first set, which was 90 minutes in total, would play out the way it did. The similarity I had in my head was Nadal-Zverev last year, when they were not quite through 2 sets and there was 2 hours on the clock already. Ruud came out firing incredibly well and hit the ball very cleanly and kind of took it to Djokovic. But I suppose if you don't win a set, it's like, well, what have you achieved?
Yeah. And I kind of guess that's what Djokovic does, isn't it? You've got, at the end of the day, you've actually got to take the set from him. He's never going to give anybody a set. And especially not people like Casper Ruud. And it was kind of a weird one as well, though, because you felt that the first set was just massively important to Ruud, and it just wasn't really important to Djokovic. there's a world where Djokovic would have won that match 6-7, 6-2, 6-2, 6-2. And I think that's what would have happened. It was basically the warm up, wasn't it? The thing, the important things I think is that I saw it. Somebody told me yesterday, that he's 6 out of 6 in tie breaks in the French Open, and he hasn't hit an unforced error.
Yeah, he's not hit a single unforced error in any of the tie breaks he's played at this tournament.
And that's Djokovic through and through. It reminds me of the last Wimbledon final when he beat Federer in it. That he played absolute dross every minute of that match, except for the 3 tie breaks that he played. In which I
think it's made me sort of. You've always said, Calvin, that he's like one of the best match players of all time, and I've never really. Well, I've understood it, but I've never really had a strong grasp on it. And I think that stat on tie breaks is what I understand of Djokovic, because it's like he understands the situation of a tiebreak. He understands like the tennis tactics of the situation so well, and he knows the exact place to put the ball that makes you the most uncomfortable. I guess that's what it is, or is there something else about tiebreaks that is worth talking about?
From Djokovic's perspective as a whole, I think the pace of the match is just the most important thing as well. Like he knows when to slow things down horribly, when to get off court for 7 minutes, when to just completely navigate. And I think the interesting thing about this era of Djokovic now, and this is, I know Calvin's saying if he won another 5, that wouldn't do anything for him in the GOAT race. That actually would do something for me quite a lot. If he's beating Alcaraz 5 times in Grand Slam finals or whatever, or in big moments to win more slams from this point, I think that is another feather in his cap. And the reason I say that is I think the level Djokovic is playing at is lower than a lot of the best players in the world at the minute. I think Alcaraz and Medvedev have played at higher levels than Novak Djokovic this year in terms of pure tennis. But it's his ability to deal with situations, deal with matches, know how to stay in them, know how to just bend a match to his will, not in the same way that Rafa brings the crowd along with him, but almost in the other way, that he knows how to just neutralize things so well. It's an amazing skill.
I think I was thinking actually on my way to Nottingham today about this, and whether, strangely now, that Djokovic fans kind of, whenever the Federer fans say that Federer's the best of all time, the greatest of all time, they always sort of use this rationale that, but when he won his slams early in his career, he was beating such and such, and they're not top players. Is it fair to say that Djokovic has now entered a reverse period of that, where he's going to claim maybe 5 or 6 from about 2 years ago to now? He's going to claim about 5 or 6 where he's beating guys who are not as good as any of those.
I think we've been in that realm for the last 3 years, really, for Djokovic.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the realm we're in now. This is what I'm kind of saying. Like, I think the next realm is arguably where it's going to be tougher, because I do think kind of Medvedev on hard courts, Alcaraz, just everywhere, are playing at good enough levels to kind of change that perception, where I think they're serious players. But yeah, the previous era has not been, or transition era, if you like, has maybe not been quite so good.
I think looking at this in a bigger sphere, what I think this has shown us, and something that I've suspected for a while, is the disappointment that I've got in the other players, in that these players and this era, which I would say are kind of like the 1997 afterward borns, like, they just don't seem to have the belief that they can beat the best players at the big tournaments. And in every era, you've got these sort of situations where the young players will come through, and they're not perfect, they may not be consistent, but kind of like McEnroe was kind of one of the first, and then Becker, Agassi, Sampras, Safin, Hewitt, Nadal, Djokovic, Murray, where they would come into these tournaments with full belief that they could beat the best players in the world when they were young, and whether it was in fight or in the latter stages as well. And this group, they just don't have that belief that they can do it. And the last one I think that has had it, and I'd even throw in Wawrinka and Del Potro into that mix as well, in terms of whether they can go tournaments in the world at the big stages, at the latter stages, and beat currently who are the best players. And Tsitsipas, Zverev, Ruud, I guess. Felix Auger is the biggest one for me. Shapovalov. Even Medvedev to a degree, who I know he's won one, but he basically won one because Djokovic had a breakdown. And he's kind of bottled another one and then didn't beat Nadal in the other one. So I think that's notable that none of this era have really shown that they can. I know there's little bits, beat somebody and then go on to win it, and these statement wins that everybody who's. I mean, it's kind of a couple of generations, maybe one generation ago, remembers Safin coming in and absolutely destroying Sampras in the final of the US Open, completely ragdolling him when Sampras was the best player in the world by a mile. And you just don't see that happening. Even the concerning thing for me is that was Alcaraz's comments the other day, where basically he admitted that he didn't think he could do it still. And I think that's tantamount there. That I always say the same thing. You've got to, in order to be the best tennis player, to win these tournaments, you've got to be good enough to win them and believe that you're good enough to win them. And I think all of these players, they fall into either one or the other of those, and not both of them. Like, I'm not sure. Like Medvedev, I actually think probably thinks he can beat them, but I'm not sure his game. He has enough in his game that he can beat them regularly enough. Tsitsipas, backhand aside, is the opposite, I'd say. Or I'll tell you, Felix Auger-Aliassime should be now beating those players, but he just doesn't believe he can beat them.
I think, yeah, Ruud. I was just going to say, Ruud firmly falls into the category of he's just not good enough. Like,
doesn't not good enough, and also not good enough, and I don't think he thinks he can beat them either.
I don't look at these Grand Slam finals that Casper Ruud's played in and think Casper Ruud's played badly for who he is here. He's played fine. Like, he's just not as good as these guys, and like that's my assessment of him. He's overachieved.
Well, I thought the one I thought was Thiem. You know, initially I was driving there to Nottingham this morning. I thought Thiem actually is the one who I think thinks he could have beat them. But then again, he's a bit older. He's not in that generation, really. Is he 93? Is he 30 this year, or is he?
I think he's 28.
He's 95, is he?
Yeah, I think that's right. He's 93.
95,
is he? He is. No, you're right. He is 30 this year.
He's 93.
Crikey.
30 this year, yeah. So I wouldn't include him. Like, that makes him 5 years older than Tsitsipas. So I wouldn't, and Thiem was the one who you thought those guys, and he's had big wins in close matches in big semi-finals against those guys before. I mean, he's beaten both Nadal and Djokovic in Slam semi-finals, which not many people have done.
Yeah, his problem's then been the other one's been waiting for him in the final.
Yeah, but it's always
a big ordeal.
None of those, when you watch them, did you think this is a matter of belief here?
No.
Like, he's strangely with him. It's been stupid. I mean, he played like the one he played, the final he played Djokovic at the Aussie Open, which was it was a good standard final, and then Thiem just threw in a game of absolute dross at 5-all in the fifth, I think it was, and you thought, how have you, after this whole match of like 4.5 hours or whatever it was, how have you just gone and thrown the match away in about a minute and a half?
Yeah, I mean, again, Thiem's a really interesting kind of case in point on this. Is like, by far, Thiem's worst performance in a Grand Slam final was the one where he played the guy he definitely should have steamrolled, Zverev, which maybe then does lead to a bit of a belief. Was he able to play that well against Djokovic and Nadal and those other ones because he kind of felt free because he knows I'm the underdog. Maybe I can't win this, but I can play well and kind of push them hard. And then when it actually came to I should win this, it kind of crumbled. He did win, obviously, but I don't know. It's kind of hard to know exactly what's going on there.
That was also nonsense. They were played in that massive empty stadium as well, which it didn't feel like a Slam final, did it?
The thing of that mentality stuff as well, like, it was interesting listening to Djokovic and Ruud yesterday, and Djokovic was obviously asked lots of questions about like, oh, are you definitely the GOAT now? And he said like, well, it's not really for me to say, and there's people who've played in previous eras, like, I'm obviously proud of my success. But he also said something about like, of course, I think I said, it was in the French portion of his press conference. Here's the translation. For me, on a daily basis, I'm the best on court because with this state of mind, it's the only state of mind or spirit that can lead to historical results in this trophy. And I think that, a lot of players will say they think they're the best, but I think Djokovic really believes it. And I walked out of Casper Ruud's press conference and I can't remember who I said it to, but I said I don't think he's enough of an arsehole to win a Grand Slam. And I think you do need that tunnel vision, just insane ability to lock in. And it's on a micro and macro level. It's like the ability to beat Djokovic and not make an unforced error in a tiebreak. And also the ability to turn up on an October afternoon in Banja Luka when it's just you and Goran and whoever and grind and be like, I'm going to work bloody hard today. Calvin.
I think it's more as well that I don't know the way to quite say it, but with Thiem, with Ruud, it's also that, like we just said, he doesn't really have the weapons. Because what you've got to do is when Djokovic locks into that, you've got to hit 7 winners. That's the only way you're going to beat him. You're going to have to hit seven winners out of 12 points, and that's the only way. The only person who has beaten Djokovic on the biggest occasions and out-rallied him is the two. There's Nadal and Murray. They're the only two people who've done it. When Federer's beat him on big occasions, he's hit winners through him. When Thiem's done it, that's what he's done. When Del Potro and Wawrinka have done it, that's what they've done. The only people who've gone, right, I can out-rally you. I'll be more patient than you. I'll move better than you. And they haven't done it more often than he has done it with them. They've just managed to do it on a couple of occasions. The problem when I go back to this mentality thing again is what all of these players have got to really be careful of is that the two reasons I thought that Alcaraz was going to beat Djokovic, I suppose 3 reasons. One, that I think he's very, very good. 2, again, I thought, and I was saying this to people, I thought that going into it, he would believe that he was going to beat Djokovic. He didn't. And the reason I thought he thought he was going to beat Djokovic was that he doesn't have this scar tissue of having been 5-0 to Djokovic in slams, or 0-5, sorry. Whereas a lot of these guys do. Tsitsipas now must be 0-4 against Djokovic. So where do you get this belief from that you're going to go onto court at a major, best of 5, and beat him when you've played him 4 times and he's beat you all 4 times? And Djokovic, as good as he played last week, Djokovic shouldn't be winning slams at 36. There should be somebody coming and making a move now the reason I say that is this is far from peak Djokovic. This is not the 2011 version of Djokovic or the 2015 version of Djokovic. This is a much worse. If those were 10 out of 10 Djokovic's, this is kind of a 6.5 version of Djokovic. That he's basically winning on nous and experience and knowing that the other guys don't think that they can beat him.
I still think Alcaraz played well, though. I didn't watch him when he was playing and think there's no belief here. I understand, the cramp has come as a result of nerves, but the actual tennis, it felt to me like he was starting to have him. He was getting on top of him. It was good.
I'm actually not sure that's true. I said it in I can't remember which podcast I said it in because I've done 20 in the last 2.5 weeks. But I said it. He didn't hit his inside in forehand for a set and a half because he was cacking it. And he might have only hit about 2 in the end because once he was cramping, he couldn't. And it was just because he knew what was coming back and he was scared of what was coming back. And I'm convinced that if he backed himself on that shot, it's such a good shot that irrespective of how good Djokovic is getting the stretch in there, I think it would have been more effective.
I think for me, though, it felt like the match had turned a little bit before that kind of cramping came. I think in the second half of that second set, it felt to me like someone who started to grow in belief and thinking, okay, I can get on top of him. And Djokovic kind of said this afterwards. At the end of that second set, he was like, oh my God, physically, I'm going to struggle here. He
would say that.
I know he would say it, but it's also, I think it is true. Alcaraz, you look at him as a specimen, that he would outlast Djokovic, I think, if he got it right. I genuinely think he was starting to turn and get to it, and the cramp was just Well, I guess kind of disproves it in some ways. But maybe
Yeah, but
my,
George,
my eyes were playing tricks on me.
you can't say that though, George, because he was playing it, but by his own admission, he got nervous because of the situation. And that's what I'm talking about. That when it comes to the big occasion, can these players, do they have the belief that that they can do it? And that's all that nerves is. It's that you don't really believe that you're going to do it, or you start questioning yourself. That's all that nerves is. You know, if you're certain you're going to do something, you won't get nervous about doing it. It's when a bit of doubt creeps in. That's when you start getting nervous.
But also, I suppose there's nervous that then might have meant he wasn't taking on the right fluids all game, and wasn't doing the right kind of, didn't get the right salt, etc. That then led to the cramp.
But why would he not do that in any other match in his career? These guys have a routine that does that. And do you think he'd have done that do you think that would have happened if he was playing Casper Ruud in the semi-finals?
Absolutely not.
I think the nerves come down to he doesn't think he could do it.
I don't know. I think there's a distinction between feeling nervous and believing you can win. I saw from his tennis a guy who was playing incredibly good level tennis who, to me, looked like he could go and win it. It's just that his body stopped, that's maybe where the nerves came in.
Why in penalty shootouts, why do players get nervous? Why do they get nervous? Yeah, but why? Pressure
feels like a trick
the pressure
question.
No, but they get nervous because they think they might miss. They think they might miss. And that's the only reason you would get nervous, because you think there's a chance that you can miss. The players who don't get nervous, the ones who are absolutely certain that they're going to score. And if that happens, then that's what nerves is. It's the belief that it's not going to. It's the belief that you might not have what it takes to get over the line. That's the thing that creeps in.
I think the thing for me as well, though, is like, how many matches have we seen Djokovic play over the last 3 years where it's been so obvious he's horribly nervous? Something like Berrettini against Wimbledon, where you're thinking he's serving at 60, 70 miles an hour here. He's doing weird things.
That was Strat, though. That was definitely Strat, that second serving.
I just don't think it is. I don't think it is. I think there is like this kind of nervous energy that Djokovic has as well. Like, I don't necessarily buy this idea that you can't be nervous and still believe you win. I think Djokovic always believes he's going to win, but has had moments of huge nervous uncertainty. I don't think Alcaraz was looking at that match thinking he couldn't win. I do think the nerves played its part and obviously manifested itself physically.
Why did he get nervous, though? He got nervous because of the chat. He started doubting whether he could win. He wouldn't get nervous about thinking. If he was certain he was going to win, he wouldn't get nervous, would he?
Well, is it nervous about the situation? I mean, that's why I'm kind of using the Djokovic example here. There's no reason he should think, I'm not going to beat Matteo Berrettini in a Wimbledon final.
Yeah, but Djokovic is nuts. Djokovic is nuts. It's like, look, what about that time when he played Del Potro and he kept falling over? He wasn't falling over because he was off balance. He was falling over because he thought he would freak out Del Potro.
He did that. He did that. Yes, on Sunday as well. Yesterday. Yes, yeah. I was right to say yesterday. I don't know if you saw it, but like he was sliding behind the baseline and like he was like doing the splits, and then he sort of rolled. And if you think about the physics of that, like it's pretty impossible to fall over in that direction from that position. And then obviously had to go and take 10 minutes like toweling off all the clay. It was just shithousing Ruud, really. But
I just don't really see how you can say it wasn't a belief issue when he's come out and said this was a mental issue. Like I don't. He came out. He said it himself. This is not speculating. He came out and said, "I just got nervous."
I suppose I'm more defending him from the perspective of I'm not going to write off. He doesn't believe he can beat these guys at Wiz Slam when he actually played fine and then just got cramp. Do you know what I mean? Like I understand there's that kind of nervous energy.
You don't get cramp after 2 sets. And I listen with him. I've got no question. I think he will get over it. It wouldn't surprise me if he played Djokovic at US Open and beats him. I'd still make that a 50-50 match if they play at US Open.
Which brings me neatly out of this debate about whether Carlos Alcaraz is nervous or not, and into the wider question. Novak Djokovic is now halfway to the calendar year Grand Slam. He has been here before, of course. Twice, actually, he's been halfway to the calendar year Grand Slam. Once he lost in the third round of Wimbledon, and once he lost in the final of the US Open in 2021, of course. George, we'll go to George's percentage house and ask what percentage Novak Djokovic is to complete the calendar year Grand Slam.
Well, I'd be surprised if he didn't win Wimbledon. I don't see I don't see anyone in that field who beats him at Wimbledon, bar Novak doing something mental. Like, the young guys aren't good enough on grass. We see that every year. Kyrgios, I just don't think will beat Djokovic. He's probably the best other grass court player who's currently, he's not even fit. Berrettini's come off court looking injured and has been terrible for a while. Murray's old and past it. Someone in my WhatsApp group this week was trying to claim to me that Murray would take Djokovic if they met in the first or second rounds at Wimbledon. I just don't even know what planet you're living on. Like, this isn't the same player. Anyway, so I give him, in my famous percentages, he's 70% to win Wimbledon, maybe even higher. Like, I just think he'll win that. US, it's crazy. He's won at the same amount of times as the French Open. Like, this is the slam that he should have done a lot better at, and he's had a lot of finals there and not got over the line. I think, as Calvin says, I make Alcaraz and Medvedev 50-50 matches for him. Zverev, we'll see where he can get back to. You know, I don't think he was playing particularly well, but that's a big confidence-boosting tournament for him, one way or another. There are guys out there who can definitely beat Djokovic if Djokovic isn't at it, and he mentally goes walkies at that tournament all the time. That said, will he have learnt from the last one? You know, will he be in a better place now he knows he's been in that situation? What happened to him there? Can he prepare for that a little bit better? Maybe, but he's a worse player now than he was there. He is definitely worse. He's declining. Like, he's good at controlling matches still, but he's not that same player. So it is going to get harder and harder. And I think Alcaraz and Medvedev are both showing really good form on the hard this year that kind of makes me think they can stop him.
I'm not sure what that number comes out at then, George, but it sounds like about sort of 40%, maybe 30%, if my maths is right.
I think it's a pretty even favourite split, the US Open, between Alcaraz, Medvedev and Djokovic. And there's obviously a bit of risk at Wimbledon, so I'd put him down at 20-25% to do it, maybe.
Yeah, that's your maths adds up there for once. Calvin, what are your thoughts?
I think, just first of all, I was just going to say on kind of related to this, but also on the last debate, somebody brought Murray up that. Again, something I was thinking earlier, that if any of these guys from this generation played Murray in like the first or second round of a major, you'd have to favour them to beat him. But if, say, Tsitsipas or Ruud or Zverev happened to play Murray in a final right now, I still reckon Murray would beat them in the final of a big tournament, just because I think he knows how to deal with that situation better than they do. And I'd still think that there's a good chance that he does, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Murray gets to final again. You never know. Wimbledon he could, but if he gets a nice draw, well, look, if you avoid Djokovic at Wimbledon, like now, the guys who've beaten him on grass are kind of like Berrettini, but he beat Berrettini now. He beat him on hard court earlier this year. Felix Auger's duffed him a couple of times, but he's in no kind of form. I don't really see who. I mean, he'll undoubtedly end up getting. The reason he'll lose at Wimbledon is he'll end up playing 5 sets for 3 matches in a row against like someone like Noguchi, and then Djur, and then someone else.
Taro Daniel.
Yeah, Taro Daniel, 5 sets, and then be knackered and probably lose to, like, you know, he'll end up
John
playing,
Isner.
Yeah, John Isner or something like that. And I mean, to be fair, last year Isner served outlier level quality serving to beat Murray. At that stage, and Murray's always beaten Isner. That's never been a problem. But then Isner just played out of his skin. Djokovic for the career calendar slam, I reckon it's probably 50-50 now. Purely because I think he'll win Wimbledon. I think he will win Wimbledon, and then after that, I don't think it would. The US Open's the one, and I'd give him a 50% chance of winning the US Open.
I think for me, yeah, I'm with you both. I think he'll win Wimbledon. I'm pretty sure of that. And it'll be 5 in a row at Wimbledon, which I hadn't really clocked. Like it's obvious, but he will have won 5 in a row at Wimbledon, which is insane, and ties Federer's Open era record. The thing I think that means he's more likely to win the US Open is what happened against Medvedev won't blindside him. I think he was genuinely a little bit blindsided by how nervous, how affected he was, how fatigued he talked quite well afterwards, I remember, about how fatiguing it had been to be constantly thinking and dealing with the idea of trying to get to the calendar slam. And I don't think he'll be blindsided by that again because he's been there before and he now knows better exactly what his body's like. So that I think, having just dropped a box of chocolates that I brought back from France on the floor, that's why I think that. Calvin, what have you got?
Point of order, James. Bjorn Borg also won 5 in a row before.
Oh, no way! Did he actually?
Yeah. That was in the opening era.
Oh, good. That's in my copy for the paper tomorrow. So get in. Good to know I've made a mistake already. I'll blame tiredness.
And what was the original question? Sorry.
Absolutely no idea. I was just worrying about the fact that I actually brought my missus quite a shit gift back from France. I've just dropped it.
That's what I was going to say. That's not great for the game, is it? That we're all sat here already thinking he's pretty shoo-in to win Wimbledon. It's not great for going into Wimbledon. It's like, you need some sort of competition. And again, it speaks volumes about the lack of competition down in the men's game. You look at it, and the men's rankings are really strange at the minute. Because if in like 15 years' time, if you were just getting into tennis, and you look back on like this last couple of years, and you just looked at the finals of the slams, you'd think, this Casper Ruud has been quite dominant in that era, and he's just not, is he? He just doesn't. Probably, would it surprise anybody if he ends up in the final of either Wimbledon or US Open?
Wimbledon would surprise me a lot.
Yeah, but you never know. Like this, draw massively opens up or something crazy, and he ends up like this one. Wimbledon, it's unlikely, but he shouldn't really made the final of any of the finals he's made, and he's ended up there. But the guy, and then guys like I think Felix is still 10 in the world. Like, how's he still 10 in the world? He's been absolutely shit this year. He's not done anything at all, and he's still the 10th best player in the world. Does anyone believe that? It's just a nonsense.
Just on the Djokovic Wimbledon titles point, going back to that discussion about whether Murray would beat Djokovic these days, one of the arguments I heard for it was like, Murray, he had his number on grass. He won their last meeting comfortably. I was like, Djokovic has won 6 Wimbledon since they last played at Wimbledon. We cannot take that head-to-head on what's happening right now. Come on, lads, wake up.
I'd tell you an interesting debate. Who would Djokovic rather play in the final of Wimbledon? Murray or Ruud? In order of who he'd least like to play, Murray, Ruud, Tsitsipas, or Felix Auger-Aliassime. I reckon he'd least like to play Murray.
All of them in straight sets.
But I reckon he'd least like to play Murray though.
I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
The last time they played, it was pretty embarrassing, to be honest.
No, it was, George. But again, I'm coming back to this point. It's not really. I'm not really talking up Murray there. I'm talking about how crap the others are when they play Djokovic in slams.
Yeah, I think for me, the one he'd least play is still Felix, just because he's got a big enough serve that he can make it a tougher afternoon. Whereas
I could take that. Yeah, I could swallow that. But I think he'd probably then
Tsitsipas he'd take in a heartbeat for sure.
All day over Murray, and Ruud he'd take over Murray any day of the week. But Felix is probably one of those though that even if he thought that he's got a big serve, he's got some firepower. Even if he's one of those, even if he's 2 sets down, he's thinking there's some bottle going to happen here, and then I'm ready to pounce. If he goes 2 sets down to Murray, you think, shit, he's not choking this out.
Are we completely wrong to just say Medvedev and Alcaraz can do nothing at Wimbledon? I feel like I've written them off in my mind, but Medvedev was okay on the grass last year. Felt like he had a little bit of form before playing Wimbledon.
Again, Wimbledon isn't like, I've been on the grass today. We've played. I think we've had 3 double sets in the last 2 days, and I think there's been 4 break points in 3 sets. And I'm going to say, outside of those games where there was break points, every game was held to 15 or love. It's easy to forget just how fast a normal grass court is, and then you get onto Wimbledon and how slow it is. And so the actual pace of the court, again, I'd give them both very much a chance in terms of pace on the court. It's again just the movement. But like you say, Medvedev kind of liked it, and Alcaraz is a year on. There's no reason to think he wouldn't be able to move on it. He's such a good natural mover.
And he made the 4th round last year. Like, it's not
Sinner
like he totaled it. Yeah.
And Sinner, he lost to Sinner, by the way, who's the one player who, outside of Djokovic, the one player who seems to have a kind of half his number.
Yeah.
He's the one.
And it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know. Maybe it makes sense to you, but it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, it's because he hits it flat and hard. Sinner can hit through. He can dominate. He can dominate the court against. He can dominate the rallies against Alcaraz because he hits it flat, and so he can hit through him. But also the ball that's coming onto him isn't a ball he particularly enjoys hitting.
Right. Okay. Let's move on to the women's final because we didn't get a chance to talk about it because of timings. I said on the WhatsApp group for the podcast that it was an exciting final, but not a particularly good one in terms of level, that is, of tennis. I mean, George, does that really matter? Does every tennis match have to be an incredibly high level to be exciting?
No, I don't think it does matter. I think there's been interesting finals where they've not necessarily been perfect level the whole way through. You do want a match that is close and feels like it can come. And, I think Muchova's played back-to-back the best 2 players in the world, or 2 of the best 3 players in the world, considering Rybakina went out ill of this tournament, and she's scared them both. She beat Sabalenka. Okay, Sabalenka, you might say, kind of lost her mind a little bit in the back end of that 3rd set, but you still have to be there to win that, forcing those positions. And she gave Swiatek a bit of a scare, really, and got her out of comfort zone. She's an awkward player to play. I've always really liked her, and I've always picked her kind of religiously in fantasy tennis for a long time. I didn't pick her this time, James, and I know you did, so that was a good pick for you. But I always pick her because I think she's got a really good mentality, and she believes she can win a lot of these big matches. But she's also got a really tricky, tough to play against game that gets players kind of out their comfort zones, and sometimes that can lead to it not necessarily being the best watch in the world, because you've got someone who's changing the spin on the ball, changing the pace of it, not giving that, the same shot twice for a player, which isn't necessarily attractive to watch, but is quite effective. I think it was a good, watchable, entertaining final, and I just hope Muchova stays fit, because she would be a great player to have in the top 10, playing regularly well, and she can do well on the grass. But equally, I know she'll probably just do a groin next week or something, because that's just what her career's been like, unfortunately. But obviously, hope not, and pray I've not just jinxed her into that or something.
Calvin, you agreed that this wasn't a high-level match. Do you think that it's more important that these matches are good tennis matches or merely entertaining, or a combination of the two, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was a terrible match either. It was, it was okay, but yeah, it had some excitement in it, which is... Look, in the women's game at the minute, I think it's probably more important that there's excitement rather than quality in those big matches. They've got to get people interested in watching them again. And, I think so. I think they'd probably, if you offered them a match like that, or a really high standard match that ended up 6-4, 6-4, 1 break in each set, the French Open tournament would definitely take what they got there. So I don't think, the minute, I don't think it's all that important. I think what's important, more important that we have some kind of regularity of competition, which we still don't seem to have. Wimbledon would be interesting, because I think you got 3 players going into, well, certainly Rybakina and Swiatek, on the grass. Who, that'd be a really good final. I think if you could get that.
Do you think that? I mean, you've kind of already answered this question because I know how you feel about it. But Swiatek obviously doesn't have much of a record at Wimbledon. I mean, is that just a bit of an anomaly, really, and that actually she's a good enough tennis player? She's been on the grass a fair amount now. She will work it out.
Yeah, I think so. There's no reason why she shouldn't be able to play. I mean, I've seen her play very well on grass in juniors. I've said before on the podcast, I saw her beat Emma Raducanu, I think, whether it was Love and Love or One and Love in junior Wimbledon. So I know she can play well on grass. But, she just has these occasional tournaments. I mean, they're not even, people can play well against her. She lost it. Was it last year that she lost to Rebecca?
It's actually
I think, wasn't it?
Oh, it was because she ended. It was the classic Elise Cornet picking her moment to be good because she ended like the 42 match unbeaten run. I guess my question is like the reason that Swiatek has become successful, and apart from being a very good tennis player and having a pretty good attitude, is because she hits the ball with quite a lot of spin. She doesn't hit the ball flat like a lot of female players do. And does she need to play that differently at Wimbledon, or does she just need to get used to moving?
I don't think either. I think it's I just think she'll just end up being better. She's only had really one season when it was only last year when she was very, very good, and she lost the corner. But that's not just her. That's a lot of the top female players have bad Grand Slams.
Especially against Elise Cornet, in fairness.
Yeah.
On the other side, of the game, I guess, like the mental side, George, Swiatek was 6-2, 3-love up in that match, and ended up 4-3 down and a breakdown in the third set. And was chuntering away at her box, and her level went to pieces, and it felt like her head went a bit as well. Do you think that we're starting to see the effects of pressure on Iga Swiatek? Because she's someone who seems to spend so much time trying to bubble herself away from it all, and she talks a lot about this in press, about how she just avoids everything to try and maintain her mental equilibrium. That would suggest to me it's someone who, when something penetrates the bubble, is maybe a bit vulnerable, and I wonder if we're starting to see that.
I wouldn't necessarily say we're starting to see it. I think I've seen it quite a few times in the past, and probably I don't think in some ways she's that dissimilar to Medvedev from that perspective, in the sense I think they're both really good mentally at 95% of the time, but there's always that dangerous wiggle room where it can go wrong, and you see a performance, you're like, what on earth happened there? And I don't know, they're both players who've worked quite hard on that mental side of their game and really prioritized it in terms of having in kind of sports psychologists. Swiatek's spoken time and time again about her name's just popped out of my head, but Daria, who has been a permanent fixture in her team since that first kind of French Open triumph. So it's clearly somewhere they've recognised they have to build up resilience. But as you say, James, at the end of the day, they're all humans. They all have mental wobbles. Like Djokovic is the best player on 99% of the days mentally, but the ones that go wrong are pretty spectacular. And there's not a player out there really. You might say Nadal probably is like maybe the one who really never kind of leaves mentally. Like he leaves physically, but he keeps going at it and at it and at it kind of relentlessly, like a farm worker, if you like, in some ways. Keeps going at the hoe, relentless. I can't really remember that many Nadal matches where I've watched him mentally gone. So it's tough. I think the question for Swiatek, just bringing it back to kind of the surfaces. I mean, I do wonder if there's a bit of a danger. I said danger. It'd still be pretty good, but the only slam we start to think she's definitely going to win is the French. Now, I do think Sabalenka and Rybakina are playing really good stuff and can, I'd put them as much favourites as Swiatek for this next tournament. whereas I wouldn't for the French. I do think she is a much more clay specialist than the other two are. I think they're possibly better all-rounders in a weird way. And that's maybe a little bit harsh on Swiatek. I just mean I think her highest level on clay is so good compared to everyone else's level on clay that feels like the clear slam for her now. Not so much a criticism as an observation.
Yeah, quite. Right, I've got some kind of one-word answer questions for us all, which will not be only one word, but one name answers. So I want you to think of the player who's impressed you the most, disappointed you the most, and surprised you the most from the tournament. We'll start with impressed you the most because it should be an easy one. Whoever has... I'm going to start and say Novak Djokovic, which feels like cheating because he won the 23rd Grand Slam. But I can't remember spending so much time going, how does he do this? How does he do this? So I just have to take Novak Djokovic, I'm afraid. George, who would you like to take? You are allowed to pick the same guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably take Muchova, to be honest. Though, I think, yeah. Well, I suppose you could go the surprise category as well.
Well, I was going to say I think you've stymied yourself there, but that's your problem.
But I think, yeah, I think she's impressed me in the sense that she faced the two best players in the world and made them very, very, very competitive matches. Whereas, like Djokovic has won every match I'd expect him to win, and the one he, maybe I didn't think he would definitely win. Quite a lot of factors went in his favour that allowed him to win that without needing to kind of break a sweat. So that didn't necessarily impress me so much about Novak, if that makes sense.
Calvin, who's your most impressive player?
I suppose it's Casper Ruud, actually, from what I expected before going in it. That, for all that I've sort of said, I don't think he's a great player. He's had a very good tournament, and he's had he's had a pretty bad year. But I think making the final out of it, you've got to say fair play to him. He doesn't mess up when things go his way. When draws open up, he takes advantage of them, and fair play to him.
Right, who's disappointed you the most? George, you can go first on this one.
Pretty easy, this one for me. I think, considering how well they'd actually played in the build-up, it's got to be Medvedev. I think it was a really bad result, and I think it's looking worse and worse when you then consider how that half of the draw panned out. He should have reached that final, and that would have been more interesting from the tournament's perspective, because he may not be the best clay court player in the world, but he would be mentally a much stiffer test for Novak, and not one who would have just got out there thinking, yeah, I'm definitely going to win this. So, yeah, disappointed, really.
Calvin, who's your disappointment?
I think probably Sabalenka. I thought that we were going to get the big, final that we wanted, and didn't really happen. It seems harsh because she made the semis. I mean, the bigger picture, yeah, George. I probably agree with George. Medvedev, pretty disappointing. But yeah, say Sabalenka. More. Yeah, I was expecting that we'd finally get. I mean, also seems a bit unfair, but Alcaraz as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. In terms of sheer things that disappointed you,
that was number one, definitely.
Yeah. And also, on Sabalenka, let's not forget she was 5-2 up in the third set. It wasn't just she lost to the better player. She bottled it in a massive way.
I don't even know if she bottled it, James. It was like she got so cocky almost that she just threw away. When the first game when I can't remember whether she served for it or she was returning when she got to, what was she, 5-3 up?
She was 5-2. It was 2-5, 30-40. She had a break. Yeah. She had a match point.
And there, it was so casual for the remainder of that game and then maybe after that, then she started getting tight as she does, start throwing in double faults. But from the point when she was 5-2, she was so casual on that I thought, she's really blown that there.
Yeah. I have joint disappointments. I agree with almost all you said, but Coco Gauff, still not being able to play against Iga Swiatek. Like, I really want that. I think that's a match that could light up the world, and it'll make Iga Swiatek more famous, and it'll make Coco Gauff more famous. And at present, the tennis is just nowhere near it. And she lost 4-2, and still can't get barely a game off Iga Swiatek. And the other one is, I mean, I don't know if disappointing is the right word, but like Stefanos Tsitsipas, like, just put in one of the most awful performances I've ever seen in a quarterfinal, and then blamed it on his sleeping pills, which you know.
I thought you were going to say sleeping patterns then, James, as that is his new relationship.
No, I mean, that may be related, but he did blame his sleeping schedule and the sleeping pills that he'd been trying to take to sort of neutralise it. So they're my two. Right, finally, which player has surprised you the most? George, have you... I mean, you've got to pick another one now, because you can't have Muchova for both.
Yeah, so I'm going to pick two of the other semi-finalists as my kind of joint ones. Zverev, like, I picked him for fantasy, but I was kind of thinking, yeah, he can get to the fourth round, but he's been pretty crap, really. So he did well. I mean, you know, I'm never going to praise him too vociferously, but semi-finals of this tournament was a very good result for Alexander Zverev, given how he's been playing this year. And the other one, I still think, like, Haddad Maia, she surprised me again. Like, kind of, you know, she's someone who's been kicking around the top 20, doing quite well on the tour for the last 18 months, 2 years, but has typically just absolutely wet the bed when it's come to a Grand Slam. So for her to kind of go and reach the semi-final did surprise me. So,
nice variation on shit the bed there, George. That was top
realised
swearing.
I saw on iTunes the other day we have that we're a clean podcast, and I do worry I sometimes ruin that by just lobbing in the odd F-bomb. So I've got to tone it down so we're not breaking Apple rules.
Well, you can say, I'm not going to say it again, but
since when we're a clean podcast.
Well, exactly. We're a tennis.
Don't listen to us that carefully. I think you get reported. Yeah.
I'm going to go next because you've stolen my surprise me the most, and that was also Beatrice Haddad-Maia, because up until now I'd kind of, and I don't like this word, but I'd kind of categorise her as a bit of a pusher, and like, you know, she'd never been past the second round of a slam and was up to world number 15 or something. I mean, it's great. I think it's brilliant. Like, Brazil is a huge tennis market. It could potentially be massive to have her doing really big things. And she played really exciting tennis and some ridiculously long matches and some ridiculous shots. So, I'm going with Haddad-Maia as well. Calvin, your biggest surprise package? I mean, you kind of said Ruud a bit, but I'm going to make you pick someone else.
Biggest surprise would be Muchova. I don't think anybody would have picked her to be in the final.
No.
Right? No, not at all. So that has to be, for me, the biggest surprise.
Yeah, very good. Right, let's move on just to a few matters arising as they are. Mostly things that we've all remembered over the course of the last 45 minutes and I've written down. We'll start with Andy Murray, who won Surbiton last week, despite the rain, despite looking a bit like crap in the first couple of rounds. But they beat Yuri Rodionov in the final to win his, what was heralded as his first grass court title in 7 years. But given that it is a challenger, and this is no disrespect to the challenger title, but given that his last one was the Wimbledon title, I think it maybe does it a bit of a disservice to say that the Surbiton Trophy is the next one, George.
It's quite funny, isn't it? Because he obviously won that match on the same day Djokovic is winning the French Open, and it's like, I think it's like the football equivalent of Djokovic winning the Champions League and Murray getting promoted to League One via the playoff final. Like, it's kind of worlds apart from two guys who, the peaks of their careers were so close together. But yeah, I mean, look, I'm being a bit harsh on Andy there. He obviously made the decision to go and do the grass, which I wasn't wholly supportive of, and I still think if you lob Murray in the bottom half of that French Open draw and he plays Thiago Seymour-Wild in the second round, so he goes to the third round of the French Open, and that's more points than he'd have got by winning this title. But that said, it's clear he wants to prioritise Wimbledon again. He has tried to do that a few years and it's not quite worked. really hope it does for him this time, because I think he's played at times this year some really good tennis, and the grass is definitely the place where he is capable of playing his best tennis. So providing he doesn't overdo it, let's hope he can get a bloody seeding. That would be really good. I think we're talking off air. If he can win Nottingham, that puts him around 35th, which feels
Should be enough.
Should be enough. But even so, he'll hopefully win a match at Queen's or whatever, and then that might even tip him over the edge. So, yeah, well done to him. And who knows? We've just droned on about how we don't think anyone can beat Djokovic on a grass court. And I certainly don't believe Murray can either. But
dare to dream, George. Dare to dream.
Dare to dream.
Calvin, we're obviously tomorrow. You, me, and Andy Murray will all be in the same place, i.e., Nottingham Tennis Centre, which I don't think is anything any of us expected even a few months ago. Why do you think Murray is playing this tournament and not, for example, Stuttgart?
I think he probably doesn't want to leave the country, but also if he wins this tournament with his Surbiton points, he's basically defended. Well, he'll have improved on what he did at this time last year in terms of ranking points. He'll have a net gain in ranking points. So, I mean, I think he's already matched them, but it's obviously it will be from 2 tournaments rather than 1. But he's already matched in Surbiton last week. He's pretty much, he got 125. He'd have got 150 for losing in the final. He got 150 for losing the final at Stuttgart last year. He's got 125 from Surbiton last week. So basically, if he wins this one, 125, he's a pretty decent spot. He's in ranking wise. There's no real reason for him to go because he'd have to win Stuttgart to get more points than that.
So you think it's more a ranking points decision than it is like a I would quite like to play 5 matches in a week again decision?
I mean, that's what I would think, but I'm not privy to what his thinking is. That's just me saying reading between the lines, what I think he's probably doing. So I know how big it is for him to try and get that seeding spot at Wimbledon. And he's probably weighed it up and where's the balance of probability? Where does it sit? I worry, I guess, a little bit. Not worry, but, the players he beat last week, he didn't beat anybody who you wouldn't think he would beat. He beat some good grass court. Couple of good grass court players, but he didn't beat anybody you'd think that's a real good win.
And looking at the Birmingham draw, and I mean this is no disrespect to anyone in
Nottingham.
it, but the Nottingham draw, you're right. And again, this is no disrespect to anyone in it, but like Thanasi Kokkinakis is in the bottom half and Murray's in the top half, and I would say he is the only player in there I would think Murray would be even remotely concerned about facing on grass, and that's like, I still don't think you're that concerned about Kokkinakis.
No, and Kokkinakis hasn't been making he hasn't been putting any trees up recently either. So I forget who he
Although
was
he did,
last week, but...
well, he played well in Roland Garros. Like he beat Evo and Wawrinka, and then lost to Khachanov in 4. So he's not playing bad tennis.
Yeah. But who did he lose to last week?
He's not been out. He's not been out in the grass yet. He's not played. He was. If he was there, he was only hitting because he wasn't in the draw.
He was there last week, so I don't know.
Well, yeah, but he must have just been hitting.
Yeah. Okay.
Because well, let me check actually. You know what? Surbiton's a challenger, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it should come up on the Google widget, but I don't think he was in the draw. James gets on tennis abstract for the 40th time in the day. No, he didn't play last week at Surbiton. Okay, weird.
Right.
Anyway, there you go. We look forward to Murray. He's playing. He may already have played by the time you hear this. He's playing a qualifier in the first round, who I don't think has been placed yet. Probably because qualifying hasn't finished because of the rain. So actually, Murray might not be on first tomorrow, which is good for me.
He's not on first anyway. There's two women's matches on before him anyway.
Ah, great. Look at that, Calvin. Actually, ahead of me on orders of play. Outstanding. Right, let's move on. We've got two more.
Although they've taken the schedule down, so maybe. But I wouldn't think that would result in Murray going on early.
No. Well, because I think his opponent may not even have qualified yet. I think that might be the problem. Yeah. Because I'm pretty sure I saw Hijikata was maybe on court. Oh no, that's Rosemary. Anyway, doesn't matter. Calvin, you wanted to talk about Dan Evans' comments, but Dan Evans is a man who comments much, and I wasn't totally sure which comments you meant, but I'm happy to talk about whichever ones you like.
It wasn't that I wanted to talk about them. I just thought that they were interesting comments. No, he just made some comments last week, didn't he? About the state of British tennis, I suppose, in a way, but kind of mainly pointed at the women's side and also the lack of working class players coming through. So you
obviously, I mean, Simon Briggs wrote something about this in the Telegraph. Obviously, a kind of big read, and you're obviously someone who you've often said tennis isn't a posh sport. You came from, I think it's probably fair to say, a fairly kind of normal background, and you worked with players who came from pretty ordinary backgrounds. I mean, do you think tennis has a problem in Britain where there aren't enough working class kids interested or involved in it?
I do. I don't think that they handle it the right way either, I think there's I don't think it's a sport. I think a lot of people think it's a sport that everybody who plays it is called, Alistair, and goes to Eton, and in their spare time they do rowing and that kind of thing. I don't think it's not that kind of sport. There's a lot of middle class people who play it. There's some working class. I mean, I've coached a lot of working class players to decent levels. I've coached 2 working class juniors to British #1 in their age group. Very, very much working class, and you would say in both cases probably if there's one lower than that, probably the bottom edge of working class. The problem that British tennis has with working class is it just doesn't really know how to deal with it. You have 2 sides of it. You have the performance side of it, where how do you fund working class players who don't have the money to go on the tennis, in inverted commas, journey? Because this is where I slightly disagree with Evo, because he was saying that by just giving 5 players the PSP, which is about £70,000 a year, that's not helping out working class players. But I know for a fact that, so his argument was you should be giving more players less money, but giving players who have no money £4,000 once a year doesn't really make a difference. It doesn't help you become a professional tennis player and give you everything you need there. But if a working class player has a shot at getting 70 grand, that is a game changer. And so it's the eternal debate. Do you fund less players with more money or more players with less money? And there's no right or wrong answer, but I know that giving loads of players £2,000 and going, this is how much money we've put into performance tennis, you'll end up with less players who are actually benefiting from anything doing that. The other side of the working class debate is this idea of participation, which the LTA have zero idea what to do on participation, and they've had zero idea since they started doing it about 20 years ago. They think that participation is basically just giving every year after Wimbledon, they'll give about 4,000 people a small racket and give them 6 weeks of coaching courses, and then they'll forget about them. And they only count participation as new players coming into the game, as opposed to what about if we just maintain those players who we've helped get into the game? They're quite good at getting people into the game, I will say. They're terrible at keeping players in the game. And specifically working class people who don't have a tennis court down the bottom of their road where they can just go and play it. There's no route for doing that, unfortunately. And on the other side of what Evo said, he made some pretty harsh but very fair comments about, I think, women's tennis, that we're not getting. This is the first. I think we won't have a direct entrance into Wimbledon this year.
Yeah,
that's not a good spot. And a couple of players have fired back with, we need to focus on the positives here, and no, what's the positives in that?
Well, there aren't any. Yeah, exactly. Katie Bolter is the new British #1, and she's ranked 126 in the world, I think.
He could also change 3 times last week. British #1.
Yeah.
Started off with was it Jodie who was #1? Or
no, it was Raducanu, and then it was Bolter, and had Swan won in the final at Surbiton against Janina Wickmeyer, she would have become #1. So I don't think Jodie actually technically ever was. Not that the WTA rankings are live anyway. And she's got a lot of points to defend over the next couple of months, so I think opportunity might have slipped by. But yeah, I mean, the facts don't change. The British #1 is ranked in the 120s, and she's also defending a lot of points in Nottingham this week. There is a quite decent chance that Emma Raducanu will be British number 1 again, like next week, which isn't a great state of affairs. There isn't a lot of strength in depth. It's all very well saying focus on the positives, but I'm not going to... great for Katie Swan to get to the final of the Surbiton Trophy. That is good. But Katie Swan is still, I think, the British number 2, and she's still ranked below 20 players from the US and 11 players from the Czech Republic and, 5 players from Germany. Or it's still... Yes, there are things to shout about, but we're not going to shout that loud when the louder shout should be for what's wrong, that's right, not what's right. I would suggest. Yeah. Humbly. Right. I have something else that I know will get your... I was going to say tail up. That's not what I mean. Get your goat, Calvin. Even though you don't believe in goats, as we discovered earlier. We have to have goats, Calvin. There are several countries in the world where they're a crucial part of the economy. Even Dodig won his, I think, 4th French Open title, if you combine mixed and men's doubles. His 7th major title in all, with Austin Krajicek, who is the new doubles number 1. Congratulations to him. They beat Sander Gill and Joran Verlegen in the final. And even Dodig...
It's Gill and Vliegen.
I tried. I don't speak Flemish or Walloon. Anyway, whoever they beat, they lost. No one remembers the losers, Calvin. History's written by the winners. And in this case, Ivan Dodig, he made a lovely acceptance speech, thanking all of his players, and he Columboed it. One last thing. And he said the one last thing he wanted to say was to complain about the fact that the doubles players weren't treated equally, he had to get a taxi to practice every day because they wouldn't send a tournament car to his hotel. He was feeling like a tourist in Paris, but to let you all today know, I'm 4 times Roland Garros champion, and this tournament deserves to treat every player and also every champion like how we deserve. I hope next year you can do better. Calvin, did you feel treated like a champion at Roland Garros?
No, but I also wasn't. So that's largely irrelevant. I mean, I'm glad he went and did it. I mean, I know a lot of the players had it on their mind, and the players were pretty pissed off at Roland Garros this year and the French Open. And it's stuff like that is ridiculous. 5 kilometers in Paris is not a lot.
Yeah, sorry, just to fill in that. So Mauresmo kind of hit back and said, look, if you stay at a hotel within 5k of the venue, then tournament transport can come and pick you up. But he was staying in a different part of Paris, and so they wouldn't send the car.
But to give some kind of, I was talking with a few people today about this at Nottingham, to give some kind of context on it, 5 kilometres, Wandsworth is 5 kilometres from the National Tennis Centre. Right, that is not far. That is not far at all. And so you're telling people that's like saying that if you're staying, if the tournament was at the National Tennis Centre, you couldn't stay further away from Wandsworth. You couldn't stay in Clapham or Clapham Junction, which is nothing. Like Manchester Airport is, I think, 13 kilometres away from Manchester City Centre. This is just ridiculous. And then Mauresmo's comments back, where every time I hear Mauresmo speak, she comes across as so arrogant and so dismissive of everybody on everything. And she just fired back, and he was more like, he shouldn't have said this. It's not the time and place. Well, when is? Fair play to him for doing it there. And you shouldn't be having to get a taxi if you're staying more than 5 kilometres away. And also, try finding a reasonable... I don't know what the exact amount is they give the players to spend on accommodation at the French Open, but try finding somewhere within 5 kilometres of Roland Garros that you can stay that is decent and below the price what they give you as well. And it's not just that, as I spoke about, I think, a few times, and he alluded to it as well, that just the way that they operated at the French Open last week, that they wouldn't let players practice before 8 a.m. or maybe 9 a.m. was the earliest you could practice, but you couldn't have a car before 8 a.m. So you couldn't they couldn't get a car to get you there before 8 a.m., which, players want to warm up and practice and, warm up before they practice. They want to maybe get a bit of breakfast at Roland Garros before they go on. But you couldn't do that because they weren't serving any breakfast. It was just croissants and some yogurt. It's just not good enough for one of the 4 best tournaments in the world. Not good enough by a mile. And again, it all comes back to this idea. Yeah, not good. It all comes back to this idea we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, that there's a real feeling at the French Open that all they're bothered about is making and saving money all the time.
It's the bottom line. I think almost everyone involved in tennis would argue about which Grand Slam's the best and which one is the second best. But I think universally most people would say the French Open is the worst one to work at, whether you're a player or whatever, a coach or anything involved with it. It seems to be universally.
Media.
I think, there's certain things that they can't do anything about. You don't want to see any of these venues changing. I don't want to see the French, there's no way that the French Open should ever be taken away from having a slam, or that it should be played anywhere other than Roland Garros, which is a small site. But there's things that they can make better at. The people there, the staff there, I'll say, were rude. The staff are rude to the players, almost universally. The way that Mauresmo speaks about the players, the way that she's dismissive of the players or any form of complaint is not a good look. And, stuff like that. Allow players to come in and practice earlier. The professional tennis players have some proper food on at the place where they can eat before they go on to practice.
Yeah. All pretty irrefutable. Although I welcome Amelie Mauresmo coming on the podcast and attempting to refute them, but I don't think that's very likely, if I'm quite frank, given the contempt that her tournament has shown for both, doubles players and, frankly, journalists over the last 2 weeks. So,
I don't think that, by the way, was just for doubles players, the 5 kilometers rule. I think it was all players.
Yeah, but I bet if Djokovic stayed 10k outside Paris, they'd still give him, or really any top 20 singles player, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, but they tend to be different. They just, they'll have their own car. They won't go and do things like that. But a lot of players, the players who aren't loaded, they don't have that option.
Yeah, you'd think so, but I do know of one very high-profile player recently who requested a car for themselves and a car for their entourage to drive them around a Grand Slam. And when they were told, well, you can just have a car to move you when you need it, they kicked off and said, no, I need 2 dedicated drivers. But anyway, that's a story for another time, for a Tennis Unfiltered Live, where I can't necessarily be sued. Right, very finally, I should just congratulate someone on winning #FTU for the Roland Garros edition. One hit wonder, Helen Garner. Congratulations by edging out by 10 points. I'll run you through her team. Alcaraz, Rune, Zverev, Draper, obviously a duck there, but Sebastian Offner, the qualifier who did so well. Swiatek, Beatrice Haddad-Maia, Yelena Ostapenko, Alina Svitolina, who obviously did very well, and Mira Andreeva, who did as well. I mean, pretty flawless team there, apart from Draper, who was probably not a bad pick anyway. So, congrats. Honourable mentions to TKFC, Stan Tuchel, Francisco, Yazda, all made top 5. Who else? Oh, someone called James Gray snuck into the top 30, mostly off the back of Karolina Muchova.
Where did I finish, James? I was hoping to claw back to a mid-table finish, but
Rune DMC 82nd, 465 points. Yeah, so you were just
top of the bottom half.
Yeah, you wish. Just 105 points behind me. But yeah, thanks to everyone who played. I will do the same thing for Wimbledon as always. If you've got any ideas about how to improve it, please keep them to yourself until the end of the US Open, because I can't change it now, so that we can have a cumulative table.
We don't have that going, do we? I don't want to see that.
The spreadsheet exists. The spreadsheet exists, I assure you.
Has Calvin managed to enter one yet?
No. Calvin's the discipline with deadlines is his real problem.
I was busy at this one.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. I think preparing for a Grand Slam is not a bad excuse. But yeah, thanks to everyone who played, and we'll do it next year. George, your apology?
I had one final any other business, if I'm allowed, James.
Yeah, quickly.
I just wanted to say that someone introduced themselves to Calvin in real life, and it was very fun, and we liked that as well. So don't feel afraid to harass us.
No, absolutely.
Not harass Calvin, but
the opposite of being harassed.
Yeah. No, I think we should encourage people to if they see, well, just Calvin. I don't want to talk to anyone. We will all be in various guises at lots of the grass court events this year. I'm going to be at Nottingham. I'll be at Queen's. I'll be at Eastbourne for a bit as well. Calvin, you're obviously doing Nottingham, and then you're doing Ilkley. Is that right?
No, Queen's.
Queen's, very good.
And then Eastbourne and Wimbledon.
Yeah, so if you see us hanging around, feel free to come up and say hello. It's quite fun meeting fans. And I'm told that if you hang out with the tennis podcast at these events, that basically you just get mobbed all the time. So I'd like to sit somewhere in between the no one talking to us and everyone talking to us. So please do come up and if you want to shout out on the pod, we'll happily do that for free. Thank you very much for listening as always. Thank you for helping keep me sane during the French Open. I hope you've enjoyed all the podlets. I'm sorry for the ones where I had to do a walk and talk. That is just how busy Grand Slams are. Most importantly, please do come back next week.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Sports Social Podcast Network.